It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Our Supreme Court, best paid entity in the land for our friends on the extreme right. Best court money can buy. Did their job today as was demanded. This, after all, the reason that the Supreme Court was seated in the fashion that it was seated to make sure that, we get to block the people from voting. We get to rig the next series of elections well on down the road. Mission accomplished. Did their job 6-3. Not surprising. All of the conservatives on one side, the liberals on the other. And, President Biden said today, the Supreme Court decision reinforces our need to demand that our democracy truly reflects the will of the people. He goes on to say that that's what he and Kamala Harris are hell-bent on doing. It is their life's work, he said. Democracy is on the line. He said today's decision makes it all the more imperative to continue the fight for the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to restore and expand voting protections. Now, what the Supreme Court did today, first of all, they upheld the Arizona voting laws, basically testing the Voting Rights Act. Can you make changes without having to do anything with Congress? The pre-clearance part of it already gone. These rules put forth were argued by the challengers that it was making it harder for minorities to vote. The Supreme Court said no. And it was a test of what was left of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that you may remember. John Roberts' court in 2013 scaled back destroyed the pre-clearance. So this was kind of the last bit of it. This is kind of all of you crazy states who want to put roadblocks in the way. This was the go-ahead. And the weird thing is they were okay with this being, outward, with basically saying outwardly, yeah, we're going to be targeting those people. And in what is another 6-3 ruling, part of they came right out and said it. To the extent that minority and non-minority groups differ with respect to employment, wealth, and education, even neutral regulations, no matter how crafted, may well result in some predictable disparities in rates of voting and non-compliance with voting rules. Basically came out and said, look, hey, not our fault. Not our fault. Even though the Voting Rights Act was put in place to help level some of that playing field, to open the ballot up to everyone, our Supreme Court right now is saying, no. They acknowledged the fact that the Arizona laws impact minority voters. They quite upfront with that. In fact, they acknowledged that it was twice as likely to impact minorities as it is white voters, but that's okay. So instead of protecting voters who have been historically disenfranchised, what they did is they said, no, we just care about the majority. We just care about, the people who show up on Tuesday. Basically the Trump voters is what they were saying. We don't the early voting stuff, all that, put many restrictions on that stuff, which again, really not the intent of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but this court, their job has been and will continue to be to undo the 20th century, and we'll talk more about that. So again, I'm reading through the stories, and I'm reading through some of the comments and stuff, and I'm looking at them basically coming out and saying, it's okay that there are these disparities. It's okay that you deliberately use those fault lines. You deliberately, choose to craft legislation to harm some voters, but not others. I mean, that's what they're basically saying. That's okay. completely okay. Now, as Elena Kagan wrote in her piece, did not hold back. She wrote, today the court undermines Section 2 and the right it provides. The majority fears that the statute Congress wrote is too radical, that it will invalidate too many state voting laws. So the majority writes to set its own rules, limiting Section 2. She goes on to say what is tragic here is the court has yet again rewritten in order to weaken a statute that stands as a monument to America's greatness and protects against the basest impulses. Basest impulses being the people who are still standing in the Pennsylvania state capitol saying the election was stolen. We need to restrict those people from mailing in their ballots. Bad. She goes on to say the majority today lessens the law, cuts Section 2 down to its own preferred size. The majority creates a set of extra textual exceptions and considerations that sap the act's strength. No matter what Congress wanted, the majority has other ideas. Kind of a backhanded slap across the six conservative justices. She finishes up her dissent by saying this court has no right to remake Section 2, that law and all laws deserve the sweep and power Congress gave it, that law of all laws should not be diminished by this court. And I look at that, and like I said, this is exactly what the Roberts Court has been set up to do. This is why they've spent so much time, so much energy, so much political treasure to build this court for this purpose, to undo the 20th century, to undo all the labor laws, to undo the tax laws, to undo the voting rights, every bit of progress that came about in the 20th century. This court will eventually, if we don't do anything, get its way and undo. And we'll be right back in the good old days of the 1880s and 1890s. Now, again, a couple of thoughts on this, and I look at it and I go, really? You're okay with saying, yeah, we know that we're harming a certain group of people, and that's okay? What happened to that equal protection under the law thing? Now, I'm no lawyer, but it seems like you're picking and choosing, which, again, we'll come back to in a minute because there's another decision today that has my ire as well. And this is one of those things where you go, okay, now you're saying, Supreme Court, that someone's wealth is now a condition of voting? Is this not something like a poll tax? Because I was thinking about it today. I remember a number of years ago, back when we were doing voter ID stuff here in Pennsylvania, and I remember, finding the Alabama literacy test or the voting test that literally no one in this country could pass. No one. Not even the wonkiest wonks. Like the last question was how many gumballs are in the jar. I mean, eventually the idea was to make sure nobody who took the test would ever get to vote. This is kind of what we're heading. It's a small step, but it's where we're getting to. So the implications of this are huge. So when Georgia passed its extremely restrictive laws, those are going to be okay according to the Supreme Court. When Texas does the same thing, if Pennsylvania goes that route, eventually we're gonna only get it back down to white-owned land-owning males. It's crazy. Now the other side of this, and this is the ironic, weird little bit, because now I'm wondering, because Virginia today, if you were paying attention to Virginia has done this weird little thing where they're going and heading towards expanding voting rights. The biggest expansion in voting rights in Virginia, pre-funding the envelopes for the ballots, maintaining ballot drop boxes in places, removing witness signatures requirements, permitting early Sunday voting, all kinds of stuff. And for me, this is the way we have to be going to undo what the Supreme Court has done. Now, you also had, a couple of representatives, Nadler and Cohen, came out and said, look, now we've got to step up our push for the John Lewis Act. We've got to get that to the floor quickly. And you saw Lieutenant Governor here in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, come out and say, look, if I were in the Senate, I'd be that 51st vote to make sure that we undo the filibuster and we save voting in this country. So again, one of those things to think about come election time. Now, the other side of this. The other side of this, one side, we're making sure that it's harder to jump over the hurdles. It's harder to get to the ballot box itself. Now the fun part, because again, the first part is let's set it up so it's harder to get to. Let's make sure that we can pass laws to make it more restrictive, especially for those people. Now, the other side of it is protect the rich. The Supreme Court also today struck down a California law that required nonprofits to disclose who their donors are. You spend over $5,000, we want to know who they are. It's one of those transparency things in my view. Now, a number of people are going, no, that's free speech. And I'm going, hold on. It's my view that free speech is only between you and your government. The argument here is, well, we need to know who's funding these things because they're cheating our tax base. But more importantly, for me, it's transparency. Who's funding Americans for Prosperity when they send out all of these quote unquote educational things? Now, the court said that the reason they were overturning California's law is because people were being harassed and they were being intimidated, and that undermines their free speech. And it got me to thinking in this weird kind of world of, are you rich enough to have free speech rights? And if you're wealthy enough, does your free speech drown out mine? The fact that you can secretly hire these army of people to spew your lines, is that better than mine? Is that bigger than mine? Should you have more of a voice than me? How much freedom can you afford? That's where my mind was at all day today. How much freedom can you afford? Because this is where our court is taking us. Again, the money, the power, the influence that our ultra wealthy, that thanks to our tax code, has created some really wildly wealthy people. They now have the ability to massively influence our politics, and have been in ways that I say have been extremely dangerous over the last 40, 50 years. So for me, I'm a transparency guy. I think you should know who's funding these attack ads against our political system. I think we should know who is funding these quote unquote educational things, especially, and this is the part that gets me, especially when they're getting tax breaks for it, because they're giving it to nonprofits and 501c3s, and they get to deduct some of their money off their, and I'm paying for their free speech. That's the part that I'm just kind of, hold on. If I'm paying for it, shouldn't I know where it's coming from? Now, this is where it gets kind of weird to me, because you had Donald Trump today, running around saying that they want to know who the person who shot Ashley Babbitt is. Ashley Babbitt, you may remember, is the person who was attacking our Capitol and was shot while trying to enter the room where all of our Congress people were. The right wants to make a martyr out of her. And what they want is they want to know who shot her so that they can make that person's life a living what. So I'm looking at this, and this is one of those weird things where you go, hold on, we're not going to divulge who the billionaires who created what happened on January 6th. We're not going to get to know the people who funded the Ashley Babbitts to show up and attack our Capitol. We're not going to go after the moneyed interest who paid all the buses to come, who flew people in from across the country. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to expose our billionaires to unnecessary scrutiny and, consequences. No, not going to do that. But the person who is protecting our Capitol, protecting the elected officials, Republicans included, that person, we need to know. We need transparency there so that they can harass and intimidate that person who has no power. Now, what's amazing to me, and I'll be quite frank about this, I'm amazed that no one has leaked that person's name already. I'm amazed that the Capitol Police, who know who this is and have a lot of Trump supporters in there, have not already leaked this person's name. Because I think even they know that once this person's name gets out, their life is never going to be safe. They're never going to have a peaceful moment. Because the wackadoodles and cute kooks and all the rest of them will harass and intimidate, and they don't have the resources to protect themselves. This person doesn't have the ability to live in a gated community like our billionaire class, whose the Supreme Court has said, no, you don't get to know who funds Americans for Prosperity or any of the other euphemistically named groups who attack our democracy every day. No, you don't get to know their names, because that's their free speech. Doesn't it seem weird to you? Doesn't it seem odd that our court is so lopsided? Doesn't it seem odd that at all costs we protect the wealthy? I'm hoping, and I've said this before, I'm hoping that the January 6th commission, or the select committee now, since Republicans will not allow a commission to go forward, that this commission is going to look into that. Who funded this? Who brought Ashley Babbitt there? Who put the money up for the buses and all of the things that came up and all of the organizing that went into creating all of these hate groups? No, we can't do that because well, they're the people who put our Supreme Court together. They're the people who funded the politicians to ensure that this court is as crazy as it is and is moving us in that direction of undoing the 20th century. But I'm still hopeful. Today, Nancy Pelosi announced the appointments of their select committee, of which it's going to be chaired up by Benny Thompson. But the big news is Liz Cheney is going to be on that side. They have asked Kevin McCarthy to expeditiously choose his members. But she said, look, if you don't, we've already got a quorum. So this is one of those things that I was talking about the other day. Do they get involved? Do they put people on the panel, on the commission, or on the committee? Do they, knowing that it's their criming that created this? Going to be interesting to see McCarthy's next move. Or do they try and make a sham out of it and put someone like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene on it just to make a mockery of it? I'm kind of thinking that's the way they may go. I mean, they're already heading down in flames anyway because they've got no agenda. But it'll be interesting to see where this plays out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did the Supreme Court make the right choice? Personally, I think this was a bad day for democracy. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.